My wife's family expects me to pay their bills. I said no. From the moment I married Lisa, I knew her family was close-knit. The kind that called, texted, and dropped by unannounced, celebrating birthdays, holidays, and even mundane Tuesdays as if the entire extended clan needed to be involved. I admired the closeness, I really did, but I had no idea just how far their sense of entitlement would reach until after we tied the knot. It started subtly at first, a text from her sister asking if I could cover her cable bill because she was short this month, followed by a call from her mom hinting that their mortgage was getting tight, and maybe, just maybe, I could help. Lisa, bless her heart, never pushed me directly. She had always been good at mediating. But there was a pattern emerging, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I tried to brush it off at first, telling myself I was overreacting, that helping family was normal, that surely a few payments here and there wouldn't hurt. But then came the envelope on our doorstep from her cousin, past due notices for a utility bill, with a note saying, "I hope you don't mind helping. Thanks." That's when I realized this wasn't about casual help. This was an expectation, a sense of entitlement that included me by marriage. One night, sitting at the kitchen table with Lisa, I finally decided I had to speak up. I could feel the tension building, my heart racing, the fear that I might sound cold or uncaring pressing against my chest. "Lisa," I began, trying to keep my tone calm, "we need to talk about your family's financial expectations. I can't keep paying their bills." She froze, spoon halfway to her mouth, and I could see the panic flicker in her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I mean that I'm happy to help once in a while if it's reasonable, but this has turned into an assumption that I am responsible for everyone's finances. I can't do it. I won't do it." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on both of us, the invisible tension twisting our stomachs. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "But they need help. They always need help. Isn't this what family does?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my own nerves. Helping is one thing. Taking responsibility for their bills every month indefinitely is another. We can't live our lives according to other people's financial struggles. We have our own responsibilities, our own future to protect. I love you and I respect your family, but this is not something I can agree to. For a moment, I thought I had broken her. She stared at me, mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't comprehend that I might say no. Tears welled up in her eyes, and my heart ached, not because I doubted my decision, but because I hated seeing her in pain. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They're my family. How can you say no to them?" I reached across the table, taking her hands in mine. "Lisa, I understand more than you think. I know they're important to you, but saying yes to everyone else at the expense of our life together isn't fair, to us or to them. If I say yes every time, it won't truly help them. It will create dependence and resentment. I want to help in a way that actually makes a difference, not just throw money at a problem indefinitely." That night we argued. I won't sugarcoat it. The words were sharp, emotions raw, tears shed by both of us. She accused me of being selfish, unfeeling, even cruel. I accused her of ignoring the reality of our own obligations, of expecting me to sacrifice our security for the comfort of others. In the heat of the argument, I could feel the years of pressure from her family's expectations, her own upbringing, and my own principles colliding like tectonic plates. We eventually retreated to separate rooms, each of us stewing in our own frustrations, each of us questioning whether our marriage could survive this rift. The next few days were tense. Her family called, texted, and messaged repeatedly, oblivious to the silent storm brewing in our home. Lisa seemed torn between loyalty to her family and solidarity with me, and I could see the weight of guilt pressing down on her shoulders. It was agonizing, watching someone you love struggle with conflicting loyalties, knowing that the path of integrity you were choosing might make you the villain in someone else's story. I knew that ultimately I had to stand firm. Every time a new request came, I calmly explained that while we cared about them, we couldn't take on ongoing financial responsibility. I suggested alternative ways to help, budgeting advice, connecting them with financial resources, temporary loans with clear repayment plans, but I refused to pay indefinitely. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Her family began to understand, or at least tolerate, our boundaries. There were grudging acknowledgments, the occasional hurtful comment, but gradually the pressure lessened. And Lisa, she came around too. One evening, sitting together on the couch, she admitted, voice soft but firm, "I see now that you were right. I was so worried about disappointing them that I didn't see how unfair it was to you or to us. I'm sorry." I felt a mixture of relief and pride. Relief that the storm was passing, and pride in both of us for navigating it without letting it destroy our marriage. That night, we talked long into the hours, not about money, but about values, priorities, and the kind of life we wanted to build together. We realized that love wasn't about sacrificing your boundaries to make everyone else comfortable. It was about protecting what was yours while helping in ways that truly mattered. Looking back now, I can see how this conflict shaped us. We learned the importance of setting boundaries, of communicating clearly, and of respecting each other's limits. We discovered that saying no doesn't mean you love less. It means you care enough to protect the relationship, to ensure that generosity is sustainable and meaningful. And I learned something crucial about myself, that standing firm, even when it's uncomfortable, doesn't make me selfish. It makes me responsible, principled, and ultimately a better partner. Am I wrong for refusing to pay my wife's family bills? Absolutely not. I acted out of necessity, love, and foresight, not malice. I chose the path that protected our marriage, our future, and our integrity. And in that choice, I found not only peace, but a deeper connection with Lisa, one built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that love isn't about saying yes to everyone, but about knowing when to say no for the right reasons. The weeks that followed my firm refusal were some of the hardest we'd faced as a couple. Lisa's family, though subtle at first, began to push harder, testing boundaries I had set with quiet but unwavering resolve. It started with small things. Her brother asking if I could cover his car repair just this once. Her aunt hinting that their grocery bills had doubled this month, and maybe I could help ease the strain. At first, I tried to remain calm, responding with polite refusals, suggesting alternatives, offering advice but not money. Every no was met with a mix of surprise, guilt-tripping, and sometimes outright frustration. I could feel Lisa's internal struggle in these moments. She loved her family deeply, and she wanted to support them. But she was also learning slowly that our marriage came first. I remember one night in particular that shook me more than any confrontation had before. Lisa's mother called, sounding unusually stressed and panicked, and explained that they had missed a few credit card payments and that their utilities were about to be cut off. She begged, in that quiet, almost pleading tone, for assistance. I could hear Lisa in the background trying to mediate, her voice tight and wavering. My heart raced. I knew the potential fallout if I refused outright. But I also knew that yielding now would undo everything we had worked for. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "I understand your situation, but we cannot take responsibility for ongoing payments. We can help you create a plan to manage these debts and connect you with resources, but I cannot pay your bills." There was a long silence, and then the quiet, almost imperceptible sigh of disappointment on the other end. I knew they were upset, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a stab of guilt. Lisa came to me later that night, tears welling in her eyes. "They're hurt," she said softly. "They feel like you don't care." I held her hands, looking into her eyes, and tried to explain again. "I care, Lisa, that's why I'm saying no. True care isn't about giving endlessly. It's about helping in ways that actually make a difference and teaching responsibility, not creating dependence. We can't sacrifice our future to fix everyone else's problems." Slowly, she began to understand. She saw the sense in protecting our finances, our boundaries, and our life together. But the emotional tension wasn't over. Her family's disappointment bled into our relationship in subtle ways. There were moments of resentment, quiet arguments about whether I had been too harsh, whether I lacked compassion. I had to remind myself to separate my feelings for them from my obligations. They were not my responsibility, and enforcing that truth was not cruelty. It was necessary. One weekend, we attended a family gathering where the tension was palpable. Her uncle made a pointed comment about generous in-laws, and I could feel the room tighten around me, eyes flicking with judgment. Lisa squeezed my hand under the table, silently signaling her support, but also revealing her own discomfort. I smiled, nodded, and kept conversation neutral, carefully avoiding any promises or commitments that might compromise my stance. The night was long, filled with subtle digs, side comments, and conversations loaded with guilt-tripping. And yet, by the end, we survived. More importantly, I noticed a shift in Lisa. She began setting boundaries with her family herself, explaining gently but firmly that while we cared deeply, we could not take on their bills. She grew stronger in her own voice, and our partnership began to feel more equal. We became a team in the truest sense, navigating the challenges together, balancing empathy with principle. Our evenings at home became a safe space again, where we could talk freely about our goals, our frustrations, and our dreams. We laughed more, planned more, and began thinking seriously about our future, buying a home, saving for retirement, investing in ourselves. We were reclaiming our lives not as enablers, but as partners. Then came the unexpected test that would define the strength of our boundaries. Lisa's younger brother lost his job. He called desperate, asking for help with rent, utilities, and food. Lisa's initial instinct was to offer support, to do the right thing, but I stopped her gently, reminding her of the lessons we had learned. Together, we devised a plan. We offered guidance, helped him find temporary work, and connected him with community assistance programs, but we did not give him direct financial aid. It was a tense process. He was angry, accusing us of abandoning family, of being selfish. Lisa felt torn, caught between loyalty to her brother and her partnership with me. But as we navigated the week, something remarkable happened. He began to take responsibility, applying for temp jobs, negotiating with his landlord, and cutting unnecessary expenses. By the end of the month, he had regained some stability, and we had preserved our boundaries without sacrificing our compassion. It was a powerful lesson. Helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing your principles. True assistance empowers others to take responsibility for their lives, rather than creating dependency. Our relationship, though tested repeatedly, had grown stronger through these trials. We had learned to communicate better, to support one another without enabling, and to navigate external pressures without losing sight of our values. And as we sat together on quiet evenings, reflecting on the weeks and months behind us, I realized how much I had changed as well. I was more patient, more empathetic, but also firmer, more grounded in my principles. I could love without sacrificing my integrity, support without losing myself. Looking back, I can see that refusing to pay Lisa's family bills was never about being unkind or uncaring. It was about protecting our marriage, our future, and our ability to help in meaningful ways. Every argument, every tense conversation, every tear shed in frustration was worth it for the lessons learned and the resilience built. Am I wrong for refusing to pay my wife's family bills? No, I acted with foresight, courage, and love. I chose to build a partnership based on equality, respect, and responsibility, rather than bowing to external pressures that would have undermined both our finances and our relationship. And in choosing that path, I discovered something invaluable. That love, when paired with clear boundaries and mutual respect, is not only sustainable, it is empowering, transformative, and enduring. The next challenge came when Lisa's family began testing our boundaries in more subtle, insidious ways. It was no longer just the bills. They started asking for favors, expecting generosity, in forms that weren't financial, but equally draining. Her uncle called to ask if I could drive him to work 3 days a week because his car had issues. Her cousin expected me to help with computer repairs. And even her mother started asking me to handle tasks that were technically my responsibility to her, but suddenly fell under the guise of family support. Each request felt like another step toward erosion of our boundaries, and I could sense the tension building between Lisa and me. She was struggling again, caught between the desire to help her loved ones and the need to maintain the principles we had fought so hard to establish. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of managing my own work and dealing with a barrage of calls and texts from her family, I finally reached my breaking point. Lisa had just returned from a family gathering, her face a mixture of exhaustion and frustration. "I don't know how to make them understand," she said quietly, collapsing onto the couch. "Every time we say no, it feels like they think we don't care. But we do." I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. "I know, Lisa, and that's why this is so hard. But caring doesn't mean giving up our lives or our sanity. We have to remember why we drew these boundaries in the first place." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, the weight of the day seemed to lift slightly. But I knew this was only temporary. The real test was yet to come. It arrived unexpectedly in the form of a large family emergency. Lisa's father had been hospitalized after a sudden heart attack, and the entire family expected immediate financial support for medical bills, home care, and daily expenses. The demands were urgent, emotional, and relentless. Lisa was torn, her love for her father pulling her in one direction, and her commitment to our shared life pulling her in another. I could see the guilt gnawing at her, the pressure of her family's expectations pressing down like a physical weight. I knew I had to act carefully. I didn't want to be cold or unsympathetic, but I also couldn't let them assume that our relationship meant endless financial sacrifice. "We can help in ways that don't compromise us," I said gently, pulling her into a hug. "We can assist with coordinating care, talking to insurance, arranging resources, but we cannot pay for everything." The days that followed were some of the most intense of my life. Every phone call, every text, every visit carried an undercurrent of expectation. I had to navigate not only the logistical challenges of supporting her family in a meaningful but limited way, but also the emotional minefield of Lisa's loyalty and guilt. There were moments when I questioned myself, wondering if I was being too rigid, too unkind. But each time I reminded myself of the bigger picture, the future we were building together, the financial and emotional stability we needed, and the principle that helping doesn't mean enabling. Gradually, I began to see a shift. Her family, faced with the reality that we could not be a limitless source of funds, started to take responsibility in ways they hadn't before. They began managing certain bills, negotiating payment plans, and seeking assistance elsewhere. Lisa, empowered by our approach, found her voice stronger than ever. She began setting limits herself, explaining gently but firmly that while we cared, we could not cover every expense. I watched her grow, and I felt a surge of pride mixed with relief. The tension in our marriage began to ease, replaced by collaboration and mutual respect. We were no longer reacting defensively to external pressure. We were navigating challenges together, making decisions as a team. One quiet evening, after weeks of intense negotiations and emotional strain, Lisa and I sat on the balcony, overlooking the city lights. She leaned against me and said, "I was so scared at first. I thought saying no would break everything, that my family would hate me, or you. But now, I see that we can care without losing ourselves. I understand what you were trying to teach me all along," I smiled, holding her close. "And I understand how hard it was for you to learn it. Boundaries are never easy, especially with family. But love isn't about endless sacrifice. It's about building something together, responsibly and respectfully." As we reflected, I realized how much we had grown, not just as a couple, but as individuals. We had learned to communicate clearly, to enforce boundaries with compassion, and to navigate the delicate balance between generosity and responsibility. Our love had strengthened because of the challenge, not in spite of it. Yet, even with progress, there were moments of tension that reminded us that the path we had chosen was not without its difficulties. Unexpected bills, subtle guilt trips, and emotional appeals continued to arise, each one a test of our commitment to our principles. But we faced them together, armed with the lessons of the past months: clarity, patience, empathy, and firm boundaries. And slowly, the culture of expectation began to shift. Lisa's family, recognizing that our support came with limits, began to respect our autonomy. They sought help in ways that were sustainable, rather than assuming that marriage meant automatic financial submission. Lisa and I, now partners in the truest sense, found a rhythm that worked. We shared responsibilities, celebrated successes, and confronted challenges side by side. And through it all, I understood something crucial. Refusing to give endlessly is not selfishness. It is the foundation of a healthy, sustainable relationship. True care empowers, it doesn't enslave. True love respects boundaries, it doesn't override them. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that saying no was the best decision I ever made. Not just for myself, but for us as a couple. It forced us to grow, to communicate, and to build a partnership based on respect, responsibility, and mutual understanding. It wasn't easy. There were tears, arguments, and moments of doubt. But each step strengthened the bond between us, proving that love and principles can coexist even in the face of relentless pressure. Am I wrong for refusing to pay my wife's family bills? No. I acted with integrity, foresight, and love. I protected our future while still offering meaningful support, teaching responsibility, and fostering independence. And in that choice, I discovered something invaluable: that love, when paired with boundaries and mutual respect, is resilient enough to survive pressure, strong enough to endure conflict, and wise enough to empower everyone involved. The months after we set firm boundaries with Lisa's family were some of the most revealing and transformative of our marriage. What had begun as a storm of expectations, guilt, and subtle manipulation gradually gave way to clarity, respect, and even a sense of relief that I hadn't anticipated. Lisa's family, initially resistant and hurt by our refusal to pay their bills, slowly began to realize that we were not adversaries, but partners enforcing rules that were healthy for all of us. One afternoon, Lisa's mother called, this time with a different tone in her voice. Instead of pleading or hinting, she asked for advice on budgeting and managing her mortgage. It was subtle, almost hesitant, but it was progress. Lisa and I spent that weekend helping her mother map out a plan. She would prioritize overdue payments, contact creditors to negotiate arrangements, and create a sustainable monthly budget. I felt a surge of satisfaction and relief. Our refusal had not alienated her family. It had prompted them to take responsibility, to face reality, instead of expecting endless rescue. Lisa watched me quietly during those conversations, her eyes soft with admiration and understanding. "You were right all along," she said one evening as we prepared dinner. "It wasn't easy, and I resisted at first, but I see now why you had to say no. I understand the difference between enabling and helping." Her words warmed me in a way that no victory over external pressure could. We had weathered the storm together, and she had grown stronger alongside me. Life began to feel lighter. We had more time for ourselves, more space to nurture our marriage without the constant weight of external financial obligations. We reconnected in ways we hadn't for months. Late-night walks, long conversations about our dreams, and shared laughter that felt genuine and unburdened. The stability we had created allowed us to start thinking about our future in concrete ways: a home of our own, investments, vacations, even the possibility of starting a family. And yet, the test of resilience did not end there. One evening, Lisa's cousin, who had previously relied heavily on us, faced a sudden emergency. Their car broke down, leaving them unable to get to work. They called Lisa, expecting her to reach out to me, expecting a check to cover the repairs. I could feel the familiar knot in my stomach, the pull of obligation versus the pull of principle. But I had grown. I answered calmly, guiding them to local repair assistance programs and public transportation options. I offered advice, logistical support, and encouragement, but no money changed hands. Lisa was nervous, worried about the backlash, but she stayed silent, trusting me to handle the situation. By the next week, her cousin had arranged for a loan from a local credit union, made necessary arrangements for repayment, and even thanked us for helping them find a sustainable solution rather than just paying for the problem. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. It proved that setting boundaries didn't have to damage relationships. It could empower others to take responsibility and learn resilience. Through all of this, my relationship with Lisa deepened. We had navigated crisis after crisis, stood firm in our principles, and emerged not just unscathed, but stronger and more united. She had seen firsthand the importance of boundaries, and I had witnessed the growth in her ability to balance compassion with responsibility. One quiet evening, we sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below, and reflected on everything we had endured. Lisa leaned against me, her voice soft but certain. I used to think that love meant saying yes to everything, sacrificing yourself for others. But I see now that love is stronger when it has limits, when it respects both people in the relationship. I held her hand tightly. Exactly. Love without boundaries is chaos. Love with boundaries is powerful. It protects, it empowers, it teaches. We didn't just survive. We grew, and we did. Our lives began to feel like our own again. We had room to breathe, to pursue our goals, to nurture our marriage, without the constant shadow of expectation. Lisa's family had learned to manage their own affairs, and while there were occasional tensions, the overall atmosphere had shifted from entitlement to respect. I often thought back to the night I first refused to pay their bills, the fear and tension that had gripped me, the uncertainty about whether I was being selfish or cruel. But with the benefit of hindsight, I realized that moment had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It forced us to confront difficult truths, to communicate clearly, and to establish the kind of partnership that could withstand external pressures without cracking. Looking back, I understand now that saying no was not just an act of self-preservation, it was an act of love. It was a decision that protected our future, reinforced our values, and allowed us to help in meaningful, sustainable ways. I also discovered something profound about myself, that I am capable of love that is firm, compassionate, and principled all at once. That refusing to give endlessly doesn't diminish care, it amplifies it by ensuring that support is effective and intentional. As time went on, the lingering tension faded, replaced by genuine connection and shared understanding. Lisa and I began planning bigger things, a home of our own, travel, and long-term investments that reflected our priorities and goals. We celebrated small victories with gratitude and acknowledged the challenges we had overcome with humility. And in the quiet moments when the chaos of expectations and obligations faded, I felt a deep sense of peace. I knew that we had done the right thing, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary, fair, and guided by love. Am I wrong for refusing to pay my wife's family bills? Absolutely not. I acted with foresight, courage, and a deep understanding of love and responsibility. I chose to protect our marriage, empower Lisa and her family, and build a foundation for a life that honors both compassion and boundaries. That refusal, difficult and uncomfortable at the time, became the defining moment of our relationship, a turning point that revealed character, resilience, and the power of principled love. Standing here now, reflecting on everything, I realize that boundaries do not weaken love, they strengthen it. Saying no does not mean you care less. It means you care enough to preserve what truly matters. And choosing integrity over convenience does not diminish a relationship, it empowers it. In the end, love is measured not by endless sacrifice, but by the courage to act responsibly, the wisdom to enforce boundaries, and the commitment to grow together with honesty, respect, and mutual understanding. And in that, Lisa and I found not only a stronger marriage, but a life filled with purpose, balance, and genuine connection, one where love thrives because it is guided by principle, compassion, and unwavering respect.